Good day, everyone. Happy Friday, and thank you for joining today's live stream. My name is Tammy DaCosta, and I am a representative of CoinW. Now, I'm sure most of you would have known that there's been big news that has come out from the US overnight, well, from yesterday, and this has obviously been really, really good for the crypto industry. So we are going to get into that in detail. But basically, we had the long-awaited executive order signed by Donald Trump, basically giving Bitcoin what I see as almost like it sealed the deal. So now the executive order basically says that the US wants to take several actions to ensure that crypto is basically, it becomes part of the US currency. So I'm going to go through a presentation a bit, well, in a few moments. I just want to show you exactly what's been happening, and then we'll go into the detail of exactly what that US inauguration has been about. And obviously this week we've seen a lot of volatility, mainly due to the inauguration of President Donald Trump. And he's already signed quite a few executive orders in numerous departments. So if we look at crypto as a whole, okay, we're looking at trending markets. So we see that there's a new coin that's up 992% today. And we see that obviously if these are trending, it means that, you know, there's basically a lot of them are meme coins. A lot of them are altcoins, but we see overall something like Ripple is doing exceptionally well today. But overall, there's a lot of green on the screen, and that is, let's just go to the top 100. Okay, so this week we have seen a big pullback in a lot of prices, but if we go to today, we see that things are a lot more optimistic. Thank goodness this turned green as I said that. But anyway, so we see that there's a lot of these coins, and this has been a discussion that's been in some time, well, basically since the elections in November, on the 5th of November, the outcome came on the 6th of November, and this obviously was really, really good for the crypto industry. And we'll look in a second at why. But we see Ethereum is up 5.8% today. And just overall, we can see there's a lot of bullish momentum that has come back into play. Now, let's go to quickly the overview. Once again, if we look at the past 24 hours, basically it's green. Okay, there's some red, but very, very little. Official Trump, his personal meme coin, is now down, but that's also been booming this week, and for obvious reasons, because now it's associated with the president. Okay, so let's look at quickly just a recap. So the market cap, crypto market cap, is currently 3.63 trillion. So we had seen a pullback below 3.5 trillion. We now see that this boost in optimism and obviously that new executive order has now promoted crypto once again. And, you know, it's now, Bitcoin is now back above 105,000. So over the next few days, when we see exactly what this policy means for crypto, we could potentially see Bitcoin and others potentially retest those highs. That would be, for Bitcoin, it would be the high set last Monday, which was above 110,000. For Ripple, it's really, really good for Ripple. Ethereum, we haven't seen as much optimism just as yet. So the December 2024 high still currently remains in place. But for a lot of these, this opens a door for the potential to now retest those highs and, for the crypto industry as a whole to go back above that 3.63 trillion. So if we now, I do have a presentation, so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and then we can quickly look at exactly what's been happening in the crypto and just over this week, just to do a quick recap. Okay, so if I'm going to, let's just do this. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this, because yesterday didn't quite go that well. Right. Okay, so if we look this week, what we have is we had obviously the US inauguration was the big thing. So we had the two main events that we did speak about, and the one was the US inauguration, and the second one was also the World Economic Forum, and that was held in Davos, Switzerland. And Donald Trump, the inauguration was obviously in the United States. So we've now had those two events, but we've also seen some conflict within what those two separate events or the outcomes and the path or the trajectory ahead. Now, what we saw with on the first day, well, basically the highlights of the week was Donald Trump coming into power. And as he took to the podium, I think it was his statements were very, very bold. But a lot of what he said during his campaign, he obviously reiterated. And just coming up to today, crypto definitely boomed on Monday. And then during the inauguration, nothing was actually said or mentioned about crypto. He did mention the department or the establishments of the Department of Energy and Efficiency, but that was about it. So overall, when we get back to the charts, we will see how prices boomed or boosted, and then during the speech, actually, they pulled back. And we saw Bitcoin almost going back to that 100,000, and then it was propelled up. Yesterday, once again, we saw a pullback, and now we've seen that boom or that, that optimism coming back in play. So what we can see, okay, we've mentioned tariffs. So what I'm going to mention is let's look at what this means. We've also seen the Stargate formed, which we touched on yesterday. Stargate would basically be to develop data centers for AI. So that boosted the tech stocks, specifically the AI stocks like NVIDIA. And then we had OpenAI, we had Oracle, which is part of the deal. So that also boosted sentiment. And then we've had that executive order about Bitcoin. So if we look, so day one, these were the primary things that were mentioned were tariffs, immigration, tax cuts, and then we also had deregulation and national states of emergency on the Mexican border, as well as the national energy emergency. Now, what we see today is quite different, okay? So what we can see is if we look at what this actually means or what Donald Trump has now suggested in terms of those regulations, is it now means, firstly, he wants the establishment of a crypto working group. So I'm just going to run through it and then we'll talk to what it actually means. Establishment, crypto working group, prohibition of central bank digital currency. So while other currencies or other global central banks have been working towards, doing that, having their own digital currencies, Donald Trump's actually against that. He wants the regulatory leadership changes, exploration of national Bitcoin reserve, and then we've got the review of stablecoin regulations. So as a whole, this is very optimistic. specifically for Bitcoin. And in my opinion, he did say he's going to be the president of crypto. And he did say, the United States is going to be the crypto capital. So this, obviously, it's very beneficial, especially for Bitcoin, because it almost steals its fate. So that means that there's going to be a lot more, there's going to be a lot more input into crypto. We've now got the crypto working group, which refers to a regulatory body that's actually going to be overseeing crypto. And I can go through a bit more of that detail. And then we've got all those other things to look forward to. So now let's go back to the charts quick, and then we can go. I'll just talk while we're looking at the charts exactly why prices are reacting the way they are. Okay, so we're back here. Okay, so let's go. So now if we're looking at Bitcoin specifically, we can see, and if we look at the daily chart, we do see that those key technical levels are still currently in play. So we had those rising wedges. We had quite a few things that have been happening. And then in December, we had crypto, or at least Bitcoin, reach a previous all-time high of 108,960. But we still can't ignore the fact that prices definitely gapped, from when the President Donald Trump was elected. And now we see that there's a shift in the fundamental value. So now Bitcoin actually has fundamental value. So we have like the gold reserve, and now that there's going to be a Bitcoin reserve, it's basically saying, okay, crypto is here to come. But for the imminent move, we still need to be vigilant of these technical levels. So if we draw a Fibonacci now from the January low to the Jan all-time high that was set last week, I just want to get this exactly right. Okay. We do see that yesterday there was that slight pullback. Well, first, prices were really taking strain during the day. And then we had more optimism, and then we had that signing of the bill. And now we see prices now breaking above, or trying to break back above 105,000, which leaves the door open for retest. First, it would be 107, 180, and then the next one, big move, would be 110, 150. So some of those more policy details, or some of those details, are expected to actually come out next week, potentially on Monday. The energy regulations and everything around that will be first in hand, and then will come the whole crypto and what's actually going to happen with regards to crypto regulations, and specifically for Bitcoin. But now if we're looking at Bitcoin, okay, we've already established Bitcoin, there's now going to be a reserve. Okay, Bitcoin is all good. What about the others? What happens next? And what is going to actually take over in terms of, if Donald Trump is against a reserve currency, such as, or he wants to regulate stable coins, he wants a crypto reserve. Is that crypto reserve just going to be Bitcoin? Probably not, because Bitcoin's already at 19 point, let's just see here. Okay, so we already see that Bitcoin's market cap and everything's been, it's already 19.81 million. We know that there's only 21 million in supply, so something has to take over. But if we look at something like Ripple or Litecoin, okay, Ripple's been doing really, really well. Okay, so once again, if we look at Ripple, and I've been bullish Ripple for a long time, and my reasoning from the beginning was the fact that Bitcoin Bitcoin was initially established. We've got the blockchain. Now there's been a lot more development, but it was initially established to not have regulatory oversight. And in the build-up, or specifically if we look at crypto or Bitcoin, we saw how, let's just go back for the years. Okay, we can basically, a chart like this tells a story. So in 2010 was the first time Bitcoin was actually used to purchase. There was a pizza that was purchased with 10,000 Bitcoin, or 2 pizzas. And that was the first time that Bitcoin actually started gaining attention, and people were like, and institutions thought, okay, so this no longer is just a crypto. It actually has some value because there's something that's pretty much, behind it. There's something backing it. And if we now look at what's been happening, I hope can everyone see my screen? I'm hoping so. Let me just see here. Okay. All right. So what's been happening is 2010, we see Bitcoin actually being used for transactional purposes. And then 2013, it starts gaining attention. Okay, 2016. Then we see in 2017, we saw that, there really was a lot more optimism, a lot more institutions started to get involved. And that is how we basically got to that 2017 high. And that was just below 20,000. And then we saw that there was that regulatory scrutiny, and obviously that was bad for Bitcoin once again. So 2018, we saw that plummet. And then 2021 or 2020, COVID hits, everything, the world's a mess. And people start realizing, actually, digital currency, now that there's COVID and it's easily transmittable, we don't really want to be depending on cash or paper notes. We want to be using something that is actually, we can, do payments digitally. But central banks, obviously, the taxman wants his revenue. And so now, if there's no banks in that, there's no regulatory oversight, they lose out in money. And then it comes with, all right, all the other things that are attached with it, or the stigmas such as like the dark web and who's actually using it. So this justifies the whole price action. Okay, now we've got that institutional adoption. Specifically through last year, we saw a lot of, the approval of the spot Bitcoin ETF and Ethereum. That definitely boosted prices. So now we've got that justifiable increase. So to be honest, to me, we were trying to break through that 69,000 mark for some time. And then with the election, that obviously gave more value. And now we're sitting quite comfortably back above, I'm not going to say comfortably above 100,000, because we have kind of tried to pull back to that level for some time this week. But now we've broken through that. And so 90,000 to me still becomes a key zone of support. Above that, I am still bullish. All right, so that's covered. But now let's look at XRP. What does it mean for XRP? XRP has a different story. And this is why, because if we talking about Bitcoin and the blockchain, it was obviously more designed for one-on-one transactions or a group of transactions. The whole point was that it wasn't going to be regulated. And so, that was what gave it some appeal. Ripple, on the other hand, was actually designed to be a blockchain for banks. So now that had a lot of, there was a lot of controversy, and they had a lot of cases, obviously, against, a lot of, pushback from the Security Exchange Commission. And now that the Security Exchange Commission is now pro-crypto, because we no longer have the same people in power, we've seen that now it gives Ripple a new fundamental value as well. Okay, so if we look at Ripple's prices and the price action, the probability, so we see that the December high, okay, so it was still the 2018. In 2018, it went above $3. It was at a high, and then only this week did it actually break that. So if we go back, this was the previous high, and okay, and now we see that this week it's actually managed to break above that, and it set a new high, and now we see that, so at 3.4, and now we do see a slight pullback, but if we look at the daily chart, there is still more optimism. So what does this mean for Ripple and for other counterparts? Okay, as I said, for Ripple, what would the blockchain be? Ripple would be used primarily for banks. Okay, so it does have a value or a function that's actually attached to it. After that, what else do we get? Now, if we look at the other cryptos that have been performing, we will see that, okay, Trump also launched his meme coin on Sunday, which also there's been a lot of controversy around it, and that's been doing really, really well. But until, for me, like, those policies still need to come in place. So for now, I'm not really looking at meme coins. I'm more focusing on what can actually be used in the future, specifically for the US. And that's where we have to look at these, and that's where altcoins actually come in. Now, currently, when we're looking at the top 100 and we're looking at Bitcoin, Ethereum, we can see, if you have something like TradingView, it tells you what layer or what these are, okay? So layer 1 means that Bitcoin was pretty much established to be, it was the prototype or the original blockchain to do those transactions, and it's a peer-to-peer network. We then have Ethereum, which is smart contracts. So there's a lot more volume. It was a lot more efficient. And then we've got like different, so this was 4 smart contract platforms. Then we've got Ripple, cryptocurrencies for enterprise solutions. So now all of these have a different role to play, and they're in different categories. So just looking at this list, if I look at the top 10, for example, let me see. This is Altcoins. Okay, well, I'm just going to focus on the top, for now, this list. Now, if we look at stable coins, so this is supposed to be, so USDT is supposed to be backed to the US dollar. However, with Trump, what did he say? He said that he does want more regulations around stable coins, and he did say that he doesn't want a digital dollar. Okay, so that, to me, with stable coins, it becomes a bit of a gray area. We then have, once again, these other, cryptos that now have other abilities. So Cardano is also layer 1, but that is more for, it's supposed to be a wider adoption, and that is supposed to be for countries that don't necessarily have the technology and that was initially required for something like a Bitcoin blockchain. But now if we go down the list, and one thing that's now really becoming popular is something like Web3 and something like Chainlink. Now, if we look at Chainlink, it's currently at number 11. And we'll go into the chart, but we can see it's based on the Ethereum network, but it's an intermediary between non-blockchain businesses and blockchain platforms. So now we're getting the linkage between non-blockchain. So once again, those businesses that are going to be required to, especially if Trump wants a digital reserve or crypto reserve, and there's going to be other transactions, the people or the companies or the countries that don't use blockchains, they're going to need to interact in some form. And this brings something like Chainlink into effect. And then we've also got, obviously, there's a lot of, at the moment, there's a lot of focus on AI and Web3 development. So something like Chainlink, once again, it's been taking a bit of strain, but now this could actually be really, really beneficial for Chainlink. And we've also got others that we will look at, but if we're looking at something like Chainlink, and we see in May 2021, Chainlink, let's see what the high was. So we were looking at a high of $53, okay? Now we're looking at basically the market capitalization is 16.62 billion, and we've seen that huge pullback. We then got the Jan 23 low over there. Since then, we've had some indecision. So once again, that doji candle there, and this is monthly, but we're just highlighting key levels. So we had indecision there. Once again, pullback. And then what did we have in December? We also had a push up, but then this long wick at the top tells us that there was a rejection. And now we're seeing that optimism return. So if we go to a shorter time frame, like the daily chart, and let's just auto fit. So we can see how Chainlink has also been a major beneficiary, especially of the elections, but it's got value behind it. So this one, I think there could potentially be more room for upside momentum. That being said, we only had a handful of cryptos. In 2009, we only had Bitcoin. And then we got things like Litecoin, which was actually a competitor. It was designed to compete against Bitcoin because of the energy that was actually required to mine Bitcoin on the blockchain. Because of the institutional adoption, there's been a lot more research and development. So a lot of these initial blockchains have basically had facelifts, so they're not as draining when it comes to energy consumption. Okay, so something like Chainlink at the moment, the $27 is pretty much resistance for me. And then when it comes to support, I would be looking at the $23 mark. So I'm still bullish there. However, it would have to break $27, and then we would see if there's the potential for further upside. So that's one, okay, of quite a few. Litecoin, once again, that was supposed to be a direct competitor against Bitcoin. And a lot of these obviously also follow in Bitcoin's footsteps. But something like Bitcoin and Ethereum they've now had approval of the futures and spot ETFs, okay? They're now traded on a futures exchange. They're regulated by the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So now that is very beneficial for them because now institutions have adopted them. And as more institutions adopt crypto, for the retailer or for the normal retail investor, it's really unaffordable. So we can look at something like Litecoin, and once again, we can see that Litecoin in 2021, there was also, it hit quite a high level, 415. And if we look now, we're still way away from there. So Litecoin is another altcoin that I think could benefit from what's actually going to transpire out of the US. But a lot of the focus will be next week and will be on what Trump says is the way forward. When it comes to Trump's meme coin, this is where I become skeptic, because even though, okay, so it does have a limited supply, I don't know what's backing it, because at the moment it's just a meme coin. But when we're talking about, or when Trump is talking about going to Mars and not having a digital dollar and, trying to take over, taking back control of Panama and oil, then what happens is we realize, okay, he's obviously serious about crypto. Bitcoin is now, it's not out of the question, but as I said, a lot of institutions, US holds a huge portion of Bitcoin as well. So it becomes, they've got the ability to keep prices high. And for somebody that's not a professional investor, it does then become extremely difficult to get your hands on it. And what comes into play next is we start looking at what's the potential, okay, not only for the current coins in circulation and what's their potential to actually gain traction specifically for altcoins, but we start looking at new coins that are also coming out. Something that I've also been looking at. So if we look at Litecoin, we can see, as I said, prior high was, I think we saw, what was it, 450? 418. Okay, so there we had 418. Let me just change this to make life easier. And then technical analysis we'll focus on Monday, where we'll actually go through some scalping strategies. But for now, it's more like the fundamentals and then the overview of next week. So we saw Litecoin in 2017, and we did see it reach 420. We then see here it was also 389. And then now we see it's still really, even though it's got like a major boost since August, it's still very far off from that 420 mark. So something like Litecoin that has very similar characteristics to Bitcoin, to me, I think this also has the potential to actually boom. But once again, we're looking at, okay, but there are technical levels to watch, and we have to realize, why do technicals come into play? It's because technicals and fundamentals, in my opinion, they do have a relationship, okay? And the technical aspect is more the psychological aspect. And this is where we have to look at liquidations, and we look at when is it attractive to buy? And this is what we saw in a lot of these cryptos. For example, if we look at Bitcoin and the price action and what happened on Monday, we saw that as soon as prices fell during the inauguration, there was a lot of institutional selling, which we could see because of the options and the futures, and if you follow the liquidity heat map. But then we also got those key levels where there were direct buying opportunities. For Bitcoin, that was, if we look, it was prices fell. Okay, once again, here we go. Okay, if we go to Monday, we saw that prices fell, and then, no, this was the previous week, sorry. As soon as prices broke below the 90,000, okay, we saw a huge pullback. And this was because a lot of those institutions, which we call the large buyers or the whales, a lot of them landed up, they add to their stockpiles here. So what happens is it prevents the further downside. And then at the same time, those that were shorting, hoping that Bitcoin prices were going to go even lower, they'll end up getting closed out. So if you're selling and expecting prices to, dip, then you have to buy back to close. So the combination of people adding to their positions, especially institutions, and those liquidations, then prevented further downside, and we can see that by the doji, and then we could see pushback from bulls, and that is when we then got that new high on Monday, and then during that inauguration, we saw prices pull back. So they closed, but once again, so this is the high of the candle, this is the low, that is the open, and that is the close, okay? So we can see that from there to there, there's a big difference, and you would be able to see this on a smaller time frame. But once again, when we got that pullback and prices were threatening that 100,000, this became another big zone for bulls to add on to positions. We saw MicroStrategy buy another 1,100 Bitcoin, and they've been piling onto their positioning as well. So this has been keeping prices steady, and prices are now quite comfortably above those levels. And if we do get a pullback, we can expect bulls or institutions to add on to their stockpiles. Just like President Donald Trump said, he wants a stockpile of Bitcoin. He wants a Bitcoin reserve. There's been a lot of speculation about it, but now it's actually in writing. And that makes a huge difference, not only for Bitcoin, but for its counterparts as well. So if we go back to Litecoin, once again, we see at this level, okay, it then becomes attractive. This was in Jan. So we saw December, this was that boost in prices. So it's nowhere near the 420 that it was in 2018. But we can still see that there's been a bullish momentum. And now what we can see is from there, we had this downward pullback once again below 95, which was actually 97, which was the previous support. And then almost immediately, we saw prices increase, and we saw that bullish momentum come back in play. Now we've seen that pullback once again, and we're seeing a little bit of bullish momentum, but nowhere near to what we've been seeing in Bitcoin. And the focus for me isn't actually the fact that Trump wants a strategic reserve, okay, because that's been in the pipeline. It was one of the things that was driving his campaigns. So that it was more of a, okay, when's it going to happen? Now he's mentioned it, okay? Now the policies or the trajectory just need to be outlined, which we may expect as soon as next week. So for Litecoin, once again, we do see a small body. We're seeing quite, well, those long wicks, which do tell us that there's still a battle between buyers and sellers. So now it will need to break above 120 in order to justify or potentially give rise to further bullish momentum. But Litecoin, once again, to me, it does have value. I'm still bullish, and this is something I will be looking at for next week. Okay, if we go to, Ripple, we've also covered Ripple, bullish, and this here, those smaller candles or the smaller bodies, once again, this signifies if you've got a small body, and especially that. So yesterday at the moment, so if a candle's red, it means that it's the close is lower than the open. So the open is the top of the body. This one has no upper wick. So as soon as it opened, prices pulled back. Okay, they dropped. Then we saw a bit of a longer short wick, which means that, okay, as soon as they got to this level, or they tried to go back to $3, there was a pullback. And once again, we then get this new battle. But now we saw the open and the close. Whereas yesterday or today, we see the open, which was in line with yesterday's close. And now we see the current close of the day. Obviously, the US session hasn't opened. That's when there's more volatility as well. So we'll have to see how things play out. But this means that there's still a lot of, bullish sentiment is coming back. And that's positive for buyers. We see the MACD, that's also still above the zero line, and that's the momentum of the uptrend is still intact. We also see prices above the 50-day moving average, which all in all, this is still a very nice picture, or there's still a lot of optimism for Ripple, especially if we look at what's on next week's agenda. We do have some economic data, and we've also got very positive, we've got earnings and big earnings. And so with regards to Ripple, I'm also focusing not only on what happens on Monday, if there's any other news of exactly how these policies are going to be, paused, and what's the growth trajectory ahead, but also to see what the Fed says. The Federal Reserve meeting is on Wednesday. And previously, if we have looked at the Federal Reserve or the meetings and if we've looked at the correlation, we have seen that Bitcoin or crypto, as well as stocks, are very sensitive to interest rate decisions. However, currently interest rates in the US are sitting at, currently they're 4.5%. And what becomes very, very important now is the fact that we have had pushback from the Fed saying the economy is still being strong, so interest rates are going to remain higher for longer. And the US is still in a debt crisis. With regards to Donald Trump, though, not only has he said that corporate taxes for those that keep their business in the US, corporate taxes are going to be reduced from 21% to 15%. What happens to tax revenue? That obviously means that tax revenue now is reduced. So with regards to controlling inflation, because inflation's been a problem, the Fed have now kept interest rates high, and higher interest rates don't bode well for things like crypto, stocks, or any non-yielding assets. For crypto, you can yield interest through staking. So I'm saying in general. So now what we need to look at is what happens next week. Next week with the US, we've got Trump is going to be speaking and elaborating more on how these policies are going to play out, as well as his energy path, and that all ties into inflation and the forecast for interest rates and so forth. But we also have big earnings. So if we look at the Fed rate decision, so the forecast is 4.5%. And we've already had Fed officials saying that they're not planning on, or there's no need to cut rates, interest rates, at a faster pace. In contrast, President Donald Trump is now saying the Americans are suffering from higher interest rates, so interest rates should be cut as soon as possible. Okay. Once again, if interest rates are lowered, it makes borrowing less expensive. We've now got corporate tax rates that are going to be reduced. For risk assets like crypto and stocks, it's very good for them because now people won't be so, instead of putting money in the bank because now they're earning 4.5%. Okay, well, it would be obviously adjusted. This is the key rate. So let's say you're earning 5% in the bank. Okay, now your interest rate is reduced. Okay, so now if you do save, you are going to be earning 4.5%. So no longer you're getting that 5%. So it becomes more attractive to now look for other options. US stocks have obviously also been booming, and especially the tech stocks. So what will be very important is to see what the Fed says in, well, not only the Fed interest rate decision, but for me personally, I'm more interested in the forward guidance. So what's expected in the next few quarters, and what is the Federal Reserve actually going to be focused on? And I am expecting crypto to be part of this conversation. We have seen in the Biden administration, and even when Trump was former president in 2016, the Fed and as a whole, the US government has been really, really against crypto up until now. And now that there's a place for it, well, specifically the Federal Reserve, they haven't necessarily been the biggest fans or the biggest adopters of crypto. And they're very reluctant to push interest rates lower because of the impact on inflation and so forth. And Donald Trump is saying, no, we actually need to take that burden off of the US, like the consumer. And this is going to be very, very important for me to actually see if this can be already the outlook for crypto is a lot more optimistic. But how do prices react to that? Okay. On the other hand, we then have a lot of corporate earnings. And if we look at corporate earnings or the Magnificent Seven, if you know about the Magnificent Seven, stocks. The Magnificent Seven are the largest companies, not only in the United States, but potentially in the world. So we've got things like Apple, we've got Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, Google or Alphabet, Meta, Tesla, and so forth. Now, a lot of these companies are actually going to be reporting earnings next week. Okay, so if we look at the amount of earnings that are coming out on, so Nvidia won't be reporting, but if we actually look at the, let's just see here, the corporate calendar. Okay. So world's biggest companies. I'm trying to see when earnings are coming out. That's not going to work. Let me go to the calendar. Okay, there. So when we are looking at these big earnings, we can see that next week, next up on market cap. Oh, I can't get it now. Okay, I will find that, but let's just carry on talking. So we've got a lot of companies that are going to be reporting earnings. We've got Microsoft. We do have Apple earnings. So that also comes into play when it comes to risk sentiment, but also for crypto, because now something like Stargaze. So Trump also announced something called Stargaze. which is the whole, it's a $500 billion project over the next 4 years, which will be aimed at building data centers for AI in the United States. Okay, so we've seen NVIDIA, we've seen a lot of the top companies, especially in tech and AI, that have really got a boost in those in that deal that was announced earlier this week, and that was on Wednesday. So if we see NVIDIA's market cap is basically, we can basically say NVIDIA alone is, their market cap is equivalent to the whole of the crypto industry. So it's huge. And that just solidifies, or it tells us how big AI has got, and it's not going to get smaller. And what ties into AI and the whole tech theme is crypto. So now the two are almost, whereas before, crypto, they definitely had a link because they were considered risk assets, but now both of them are playing a much more prominent role, especially in the future, and especially for the future prospects of the United States. We then need to realize who is the board or who's the cabinet. We've got Elon Musk. I mean, he's pretty much, in my opinion, the greatest innovator of our time. Whether you like him or not, it doesn't matter. He's got Tesla, he's got Starlink, he wants to, colonize Mars, and Trump is backing that. They want to do Neuralink. So this is all very optimistic, or there's still a lot more optimism when it comes to AI. And I'm seeing more and more ties between especially stocks and things like crypto. So now they're actually becoming interlinking. And this is where I say we have to look at what is actually going to come next. How are they going to, if they don't want a digital dollar and they're not really for printing dollars, or they want the dollar to be tied to something, there's the gold reserve. But now, specifically with Trump saying he wants a strategic crypto reserve, to me, that says, okay, he's obviously all for crypto. He did also release his own meme coin, so we won't get into that. But then we have to look at these, not only is it for the earnings, but we need to look at what gets said in these earnings with regards to what happens next. Can't believe I still can't find this. Right, it's right there. Apologies. Okay, let's go here. So let's go to next week. So next week, Wednesday, we have, and just look at the market caps. We have Microsoft, market cap 3.3 trillion. We have Meta, market cap 1.58. Tesla, 1.31. So already now, this is 3 of the Magnificent 7, okay? So this is already a huge risk, not only for the stock market, but for assets as a whole. We have seen the S&P and NASDAQ once again just flying because Trump is also very pro, the tech and the AI industry. And then on Thursday, we have Apple. So it is a very big, high-risk week next week, especially with the culmination of all these things. Now, when it comes to earnings, what I'll also be looking out for is any clues of what altcoins may be used to fund these projects. So now we're going to need these bigger projects. We are going to need more funding. We know that Bitcoin is already tied up in a lot of institutional adoption, and we have to look at the blockchains. So now we have to look at which altcoins may actually benefit from this. Ethereum is one of the blockchains that are used for, multiple sources now. However, it isn't capped, but there have been if we look at other, let's just see if I can find the chat. If we look at something like Render, okay, Render's an altcoin token that has recently so something like Render is a token that is now focused. It will basically be focused on graphics, and it will be focused on the blockchains. Okay, a coin like Render, if you have to look at the blockchain and what the blockchain is about, it is aimed at also Web3, and it is aimed at AI. So something like this, when it comes to all these AI infrastructure deals and so forth, in the end, AI is also going to need to be regulated. Okay, and that was also mentioned at the World Economic Forum. So something like Render, which is a crypto that its blockchain is actually aimed at, keeping track of the AI processes or the AI side, to me, this is something, a token or coin similar to this, that could also potentially have value with regards to those data processes and so forth. So for Render, if we look at that, so bear all this in mind. And then once again, we need to take the technical side. So we are running out of time. But let's look. So we can see Render. Okay, this is March. It hit a tie. And then we saw December. Once again, it also got a boost. And now prices have been pretty subdued. Okay, they're currently hovering around 7.185. Oh, just to mention another one, something like Dogecoin, even though it's a meme stock, we need to realize who's behind it, and that's Elon Musk. So these type of coins I'm also looking at. For Render specifically, I think to get a push higher, we would need to break above that 7.2. And then my take profit would probably be, well, for the short run, at $9. In contrast, I think if we did get a pullback, you wanted to keep a pretty tight stop, it would be around like 6.4. But these are the altcoins that I'm looking at, especially going into next week. And as I said, if we take in all these policies, we're going to be hearing more from Donald Trump. We're going to be hearing more from the World Economic Forum. And even though Bitcoin is currently still in power, in terms of dominance as well, it's not altcoin season because Bitcoin dominance is still really, really high. So we need to keep an eye out on these. And these are the things, or these are the type of cryptos I'll be looking out for next week. On Monday, we're going to be doing technical analysis. So I'm not too sure if anybody wants to, if you do leave a comment and tell me if you're looking at anything in particular or any type of analysis you want, and then we will get into that. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.